you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. For the last month, we've been doing a sermon series called That's Not in the Bible. And today's gospel reading might top a similar list, things that you can't believe are in the Bible. The parable of the shrewd manager, as you just heard, is perhaps one of the strangest things that Jesus ever says. Basically, a man gets fired for mismanaging his boss's money. Desperate to secure something for his future, he goes behind his boss's back and commits fraud. But when the boss discovers the scheme, he praises the manager for his cleverness. And, here's the kicker, Jesus says, yes, this. Think like this manager. The best commentary I personally have ever heard on this parable consists of 5 words from my delightfully irreverent friend Rachel. Jesus, you're drunk. Go home. Perhaps even stranger than Jesus saying this is the fact that gospel writer Luke puts this crazy parable in the Bible. And we can tell that the parable makes Luke uncomfortable because he adds all these unrelated sayings at the end of it, verses 10 through 13, ostensibly trying to make sense of what he's just written. Whoever is dishonest with a little, Luke writes, will be dishonest with much. Well, yeah. So like the manager? The guy that 2 verses ago Jesus told us to imitate, you mean? But you know who I really have to give it to here? It's the people who put together the lectionary. Because not only did they decide to include this story, they could have left it out, but they put it in September, which means that it shows up right before stewardship season. Great idea, y'all! We're about to ask people to pledge money to the church, but first, let's hear Jesus give the stamp of approval to a shady, money-swindling book cooker. And in related news, your pledge cards should soon be arriving in the mail. We really don't know what to make of this parable, do we? Our small group Bible studies just finished studying Jesus' parables, and so I asked them, did you figure this one out? Any insights to share? And I think the best answer is one I got from one of you who said, do you think maybe Jesus was being facetious? And we missed the point and put it in the Bible. Maybe. I do think it's quite likely that we've missed the point. There are some cultural and linguistic gaps here, perhaps most obviously in verse 9, where the NRSV reads, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Because our English Bibles say dishonest wealth, but the Greek says unjust mammon, or wealth of injustice, which implies that maybe the manager isn't the biggest problem in this parable. Maybe the problem is the wealth itself. Or is it a problem? Now, Jesus has a lot to say about money. It's one of the topics he talks about the most. Mostly he says that the rich have too much and the poor have too little. And so our job is to share it and redistribute it so that everyone has enough. And in this parable, when the manager manager reduces the debts that the debtors owe his master, he is 100% looking out for himself and his future security, don't get me wrong. But he also is redistributing the wealth from the rich to the poor, which is what Jesus is always trying to get his disciples to do. The manager maybe is a swindling con man, but he's also a sort of accidental Robin Hood, managing unjust wealth in the direction of justice. And Jesus says to his disciples, I want you to learn from this guy. Now, surely, the lesson to take from the manager is not his dishonesty or his fraud. But I wonder, is it possible that Jesus is asking us to imitate his ingenuity, his cleverness, his resourcefulness, his commitment to his goal? Unlike what Jesus calls the children of light, righteous disciples who want to keep detached from the world, keep themselves pure and spiritual, this guy is willing to get his hands dirty. His desperation causes him to take risks, to think outside the box, and to work for the kingdom of heaven in decidedly unorthodox ways. Over the last couple years, I have spent a lot of time reading about and talking with colleagues about something that is being called the church property transition. Basically, folks who study demographics are telling us that we are going through a major shift in the religious landscape of America. And it is likely, almost inevitable, that many churches are going to be closing their doors in the next couple decades. Some estimate as many as 100,000. It's sad, but it's true. And what it also means is that these church buildings and properties are about to be changing hands. The folks I'm talking with about this transition are asking, how do we use this? Even this, the closing of tens of thousands of churches, and make it into something good. How can we, like Luke's shrewd manager, take advantage of even the most dismal of circumstances and find the opportunity to advance God's kingdom? One of the organizations doing this work is the group we got the grant fund from, the National Fund for Sacred Places. Another is called Rooted Good, and it was started by a Presbyterian minister at the University of Wisconsin who decided to try a little experiment with a dying campus ministry that he turned into student housing in a community center complex that today still offers worship and Bible study alongside support groups for students of color and the LGBTQIA+ community. And what the leaders of this movement are finding is that once they start thinking outside the box, there's really no upper or outer limit to how a church property can serve its community. Churches that have closed are being turned into affordable housing, community centers, or performing arts venues. Congregations that are still active but struggling to maintain old, beautiful buildings, sound familiar, are sharing their space with public health agencies, community clinics, other nonprofits. One presbytery in the Pacific Northwest gave church property back to the indigenous people who lived there, and then partnered with tribal leaders to turn the old building into a community health center for Native people. It's unorthodox, but I think we'd be hard-pressed to say it isn't ministry. Like the manager in the parable, these leaders are moving wealth in the direction of justice. They are asking what their neighbors need and how they can use the resources they have to provide it. And they are not afraid to get their hands dirty and take a few risks in the process. We in this congregation are fortunate not to be one of those churches looking at imminent closure. We are a healthy, vital little community of faith. And I can't help but wonder if that is in part because we've got a little bit of this resourceful manager in our DNA. Over our nearly 151 years of ministry, our church has been home to preschools, 12-step meetings, community organizations and support groups. We've been a dance hall, a yoga studio, a concert venue, a rehearsal space, and a voting booth. A few years ago, when our friends at Dreamtree asked what we'd think about putting up the homeless population of Taos for a couple months in the winter, Session said, sure, what could possibly go wrong? This kind of outside-of-the-box thinking is our congregational modus operandi. We're scrappy, we're enterprising, and we learn by doing, even sometimes by doing it wrong. And friends, if I understand this parable, that is exactly the mindset that Jesus is asking of us when it comes to advancing God's kingdom. And if that's the lesson, then I think Scripture's word for us today might just be, keep it up. Do not grow weary in doing good. Remain open, look for the opportunities. Don't be afraid to take the harder and messier route if it seems like it might be the more faithful one. Jesus never said the way, the truth, and the life would be straight and narrow. What he said is that he'll be with us on the journey. This summer, we completed an over $250,000 worth of buildings improvement project. Do y'all remember that? And then literally the week that construction wrapped up, 3 new 12-step groups moved into our back building. Which means that our church is now a place where ministry takes place 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 if it's a leap year. If that is not managing our resources in the direction of God's kingdom, then I don't know what is. So keep your eyes open, friends. I can't wait to see what God does with us next.